My son slapped me 30 times in front of his wife, so I sold his house while he was at work. My name is Beulah Anderson, 72 years old, and I never thought my only son would ever raise a hand against me. The sting of those 30 slaps still burns on my cheek, but not as much as the betrayal burns in my heart. After dedicating my entire life to raising Douglas alone when his father died, this is how he repaid my sacrifices. What happened next? Well, let's just say I found my power again. Before I share this life-changing story, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like button. If you believe respect is the foundation of every family relationship, I became a widow when Douglas was just 10 years old. My husband Thomas died suddenly from a heart attack, leaving me alone to raise our son. Those early days were a blur of grief, worry, and determination. I remember sitting at our kitchen table late at night, bills spread out before me, wondering how I would manage everything on my nurse's salary. But I made a promise to Thomas and to myself that our boy would have every opportunity in life. Douglas was such a sweet child back then. He had his father's warm brown eyes and gentle smile. Every morning he would wake up early, just to help me prepare breakfast before school. "Mom, you work too hard," he would say, his small hands carefully arranging toast and fruit on plates. My heart would melt at his thoughtfulness. I worked as a registered nurse at Memorial Hospital, often taking double shifts to make ends meet. The other nurses would ask how I managed it all, especially on those days when I'd been on my feet for 16 hours straight. "My son is worth every aching muscle," I'd tell them with a tired smile. And he was. Our little house on Maple Street wasn't fancy, but we made it a home. It had belonged to Thomas's parents, and they had left it to him. The mortgage was paid off, which was our saving grace during those financially tight years. I still remember the day Thomas and I moved in as newlyweds, painting the walls together, arguing playfully about furniture placement. Every corner of that house held memories. Douglas thrived despite growing up without a father. He joined the school chess club in middle school and discovered a natural talent for numbers. By high school, he was tutoring other students in math and science. I would beam with pride when his teachers praised his intelligence and kind nature at parent-teacher conferences. We had our special traditions that bonded us. Every Sunday, we would bake cookies together using my grandmother's recipe. Douglas would carefully measure the ingredients while I supervised. As the sweet aroma filled our kitchen, we'd talk about everything and nothing. Those conversations were the foundation of our relationship, built on trust and open communication. Christmas was always special for us. I saved all year to make sure Douglas had presents under our modest tree. One year, when he was 14, I managed to buy him the computer he had been dreaming about for his coding projects. I'll never forget the look of pure joy on his face when he unwrapped it. Later that night, I found a handwritten note on my pillow. "Thank you, Mom. I know how hard you worked for this. I'll make you proud one day." And proud he made me. Douglas graduated high school as valedictorian. His speech mentioned how his mother had shown him that, with hard work and determination, anything was possible. I sat in the audience, tears streaming down my face, my heart so full it could burst. College was our next challenge. I had been saving since he was born, but tuition costs had risen dramatically. I was prepared to take out loans when Douglas was offered a full scholarship to State University for his academic achievements. That night, we celebrated with a special dinner at the only fancy restaurant in town. "This is just the beginning, Mom," he said, raising his glass of sparkling cider to toast. "One day, I'll take care of you the way you've taken care of me." During his college years, Douglas would call me every Sunday without fail. He would share stories about his classes, his roommates, and eventually his internship at a prestigious financial firm. I cherished those calls, even as I sensed him growing more independent. This was what I had worked for, after all, to raise a son who could stand on his own. After graduation, Douglas landed a job at that same financial firm. Within 3 years, he had been promoted twice. He would visit home regularly, sometimes bringing groceries or small gifts. "You don't need to do that," I would tell him, but he would just smile and say, "Let me do this small thing for you, Mom." When Douglas turned 29, he announced he was ready to buy his own home. We spent weekends looking at properties together. I offered my opinion when asked, but was careful not to overstep. This was his decision, his milestone. He eventually found a beautiful townhouse closer to the city. "You'll always have a room there," he promised as he signed the papers, "whenever you want to visit." Those were golden years. My son had grown into a successful, caring man. I had transitioned to part-time nursing, enjoying a bit more leisure in my life. We still maintained our Sunday traditions, though now Douglas would often cook for me instead. I felt fulfilled, secure in the knowledge that I had done right by Thomas in raising our son. I had no idea how quickly everything would change. Douglas met Amanda at a charity gala hosted by his company. He called me the very next day, his voice animated in a way I hadn't heard before. "Mom, I've met someone," he said. "She's incredible, smart, beautiful. She works in fashion marketing. I think this might be serious." I was happy for him, truly. At 32, he had dated other women, but none had captured his attention quite like this. A month later, Douglas brought Amanda to Sunday dinner at my house. She was indeed beautiful, with perfectly styled blonde hair and designer clothes that made my living room feel suddenly shabby. She air-kissed my cheek when I greeted her and immediately began examining my home with critical eyes. "What a quaint little place," she said, emphasizing the word little in a way that made it clear she found it lacking. "Douglas told me you've lived here forever." Throughout dinner, Amanda spoke mostly about herself, her career trajectory, the celebrities she had worked with, her plans to launch her own brand someday. When I asked about her family, she waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, we're not really close. They live in Ohio, very middle America. You know, I left as soon as I could." Something about her response made me uncomfortable, but I smiled and nodded. For Douglas's sake, I wanted to like her. I noticed how he looked at her with complete adoration, refilling her wine glass before she asked, laughing at all her jokes. My motherly instinct whispered caution, but I pushed it aside. After all, who was I to judge after one meeting? As they were leaving, Douglas hung back to speak with me while Amanda waited in the car. "What do you think?" he asked eagerly. I chose my words carefully. "She seems very ambitious," I said. "Are you happy?" His face lit up. "Happier than I've ever been, Mom." What else could I say? I hugged him tightly and whispered, "Then I'm happy for you." Their relationship moved quickly. Within 6 months, they were living together in Douglas's townhouse. Our Sunday dinners became less frequent. "Amanda has brunch with her colleagues on Sundays," Douglas explained. "It's important for her networking." When we did get together, Amanda would often check her phone constantly or bring the conversation back to her needs and plans. I began to notice changes in my son. He dressed differently, wearing only designer labels that Amanda selected. He spoke differently too, using phrases that seemed foreign to his nature. Most concerning was how he had begun to reference his childhood. "I never had the advantages other kids had," he said once while Amanda nodded sympathetically. I sat there stunned, remembering all the sacrifices and efforts to give him everything he needed. 9 months after they met, Douglas announced their engagement. The wedding planning immediately took over their lives, and by extension, mine. Amanda had very specific visions, all of which required substantial money. "I always dreamed of getting married in the Hamptons," she told Douglas, who agreed without hesitation despite the astronomical cost. When I gently suggested some more affordable alternatives, Amanda looked at me as if I had suggested they marry in a barn. "This is our special day, Beulah," she said, never calling me Mom or Mrs. Anderson. "We can't compromise on making memories that will last a lifetime." Douglas pulled me aside after that conversation. "Mom money isn't an issue," he said firmly. "I've been saving and investing. Please don't make Amanda feel bad about wanting a beautiful wedding." I apologized, feeling somehow that I had become the villain in a story I didn't recognize. The wedding planning revealed more about Amanda's character. She excluded me from most decisions, including the mother of the groom dress. "I've selected something appropriate for you," she informed me 2 weeks before the wedding. The dress she chose was matronly and drab, making me look at least 10 years older. When I suggested a different color, Amanda's eyes hardened. "It would throw off our entire color scheme," she said with finality. Douglas said nothing, standing beside his fiancée with a placating smile. I wore the dress she chose. The wedding itself was a lavish affair, exactly as Amanda had envisioned. I sat in the front row watching my son pledge his life to a woman who had already begun to change him. During his vows, Douglas thanked Amanda for showing him a better life, as if his life before her had been somehow deficient. I felt a stab of pain, but applauded with everyone else plastering a smile on my face for the photographs. At the reception, I was seated at a table far from the main wedding party with distant relatives of Amanda's family. Douglas danced with me for the obligatory mother-son dance, but his eyes kept drifting to Amanda throughout. "I'm really happy, Mom," he whispered as the song ended. I hugged him tightly, hoping he truly was. After returning from their honeymoon in Bali, the newlyweds settled into married life. My invitations to dinner were often declined. "We're renovating the townhouse," Douglas explained. "Amanda has a vision," or "Amanda's parents are visiting," or "Amanda has an important work event." When I did see them, Amanda would make subtle comments about my appearance, my home, even my career. "Nursing is so noble," she said once, "working all those hours for such modest pay." Her tone made it clear she found the profession beneath her. Douglas, instead of defending the career that had put him through school, nodded in agreement. The most painful change was in how Douglas spoke about his upbringing. "I never had the opportunities other kids had," he said at a dinner with Amanda's friends. "Growing up with a single mom, we struggled financially." I sat silently remembering how I had worked extra shifts to pay for his soccer camp, his computer coding classes, his first car. Phone calls between us became shorter, more perfunctory. "Can I call you back, Mom? We're about to meet Amanda's boss for drinks," he would say, but the return call rarely came. Birthday and holiday gifts I sent were acknowledged with brief text messages, if at all. I tried to speak with Douglas about the distance growing between us. "I feel like we're drifting apart," I said during one of our rare phone conversations. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, Mom," he replied, sounding irritated. "I'm just busy building my life with Amanda. You can't expect things to stay the same forever." His words hurt, but I told myself this was natural. Children grow up, form their own families. I needed to give him space. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that Amanda was deliberately creating that space, widening it into a chasm I couldn't cross. The breaking point came at Thanksgiving, a year after their wedding. I had invited them to dinner as I always did, preparing all of Douglas's favorite dishes. They arrived 2 hours late, Amanda complaining about traffic, though I knew the drive from their home took only 30 minutes. Throughout the meal, Amanda criticized everything from my outdated tableware to the excessive carbs in the traditional menu. Douglas laughed at her comments, adding his own criticisms. "Remember those paper napkins we used to use? Mom Amanda taught me about linen napkins. So much classier, right?" As I served the pumpkin pie, a recipe passed down from my grandmother, Amanda took one bite and pushed it away. "So sugary," she remarked. "Douglas and I are watching our refined sugar intake." Douglas, who had always loved this pie, set his fork down without tasting it. "Amanda's right, Mom. You should really consider healthier recipes." I looked at my son, this stranger across the table, and felt my heart breaking. The sweet boy who had once helped me bake cookies was gone, replaced by someone who seemed embarrassed by his roots, by me. That night, after they left, I cried for the first time in years. Something fundamental had shifted, and I feared there was no going back. Little did I know that worse was yet to come. The call came on a Tuesday morning in early April. I was in my garden planting the spring flowers that always brightened our street. Douglas rarely called on weekdays, so I hurried inside to answer, thinking something might be wrong. "Mom, we need to talk about the house," he said without preamble. His tone was businesslike, lacking the warmth I associated with my son. "What about it?" I asked, confused by the abrupt topic. "Amanda and I have been discussing our finances," he continued. "As you know, we bought the townhouse last year, and the mortgage payments are substantial." I listened, still unsure where this conversation was heading. "I remembered that you put the house in my name years ago," he said, his voice taking on a tone I'd never heard from him before. "It's sitting there, a valuable asset that's not being utilized properly." The house, my home. Yes, I had put it in Douglas's name 15 years ago when he turned 21. It had been a practical decision suggested by my financial advisor to avoid probate and estate taxes when I passed. The understanding had always been that it remained my home for as long as I lived. "What are you saying, Douglas?" I asked, though a sinking feeling told me I already knew. "Amanda and I think it would be best if we sold the house," he stated flatly. Property values in your neighborhood have increased significantly. We could use the proceeds to pay down our mortgage and possibly invest in a vacation property." I gripped the phone tighter, trying to process his words. "But this is my home," I said quietly. "Where would I go?" There was a pause, and I heard Amanda's voice in the background, though I couldn't make out her words. Douglas cleared his throat. "We thought you might consider a senior living community. There's a nice one just outside town that offers independent living apartments." A senior living community. At 68, I was active, healthy, still working part-time at the hospital. My garden was my joy, my neighbors, my friends. This house held every memory I cherished my life with. Thomas, raising Douglas, building our little family. "I don't want to move, Douglas," I said, my voice stronger now. "This was never the arrangement when I put the house in your name. It was for inheritance purposes only." His tone hardened. "Legally, the house is mine, Mom. I'm trying to be considerate by discussing this with you, but ultimately it's my decision." My consideration by discussing this with you. The words stung like physical blows. "Douglas, please," I began, but he cut me off. "I need to get back to work. Think about what I've said. Amanda and I will come by this weekend to discuss the timeline. We'd like to list the house by the end of the month." The call ended, leaving me standing in my kitchen surrounded by the home I had lovingly maintained for decades, now apparently no longer mine. I sank into a chair, trying to remember the details of that long-ago transaction. I had trusted Douglas completely, signing the papers my financial advisor prepared without scrutinizing every clause. Had I been naive? Had there been some protection for me that I had overlooked? For the next few days, I moved through my routine in a daze. I called my friend Martha, a retired attorney, and explained the situation. "Beulah, do you have copies of the paperwork?" she asked. I searched through my filing cabinet, finding the folder labeled House Transfer Documents. As I flipped through the pages, a detail caught my eye, something I had forgotten over the years. I read it aloud to Martha. "The transferor Beulah Anderson retains lifetime rights to occupy the property. Additionally, transferor maintains the right to sell or otherwise dispose of the property if circumstances necessitate with proceeds of any such sale belonging to the transferor." Martha's voice brightened. "That's a reversionary clause. Your advisor included protection for you. Douglas can't force you to sell or move out, and more importantly, you still have the right to sell the property yourself if needed." Relief washed over me, followed quickly by sadness. Why would I ever need to invoke this clause against my own son? What had happened to the boy who wrote me thank you notes and promised to take care of me? I didn't call Douglas back. I decided to wait for the weekend visit he had mentioned to see what more he and Amanda had to say. Perhaps face to face I could reach the son I had raised appeal to his better nature. That Saturday, their luxury SUV pulled into my driveway. I had spent the morning baking Douglas's favorite cookies, a peace offering of sorts. They sat untouched on the coffee table as the conversation unfolded. "Mom, have you thought about what we discussed?" Douglas asked, sitting stiffly on the sofa beside Amanda. She was surveying my living room with the critical eye of someone already planning renovations. "Yes, I have," I replied calmly, "and I want to remind you that this house has been my home for over 40 years. Your father and I raised you here. All my memories are within these walls." Amanda rolled her eyes subtly. "Memories don't pay mortgages, Beulah," she said. "Douglas and I are thinking practically. This house is an underutilized asset." "An underutilized asset." I echoed the term, so cold and impersonal for a home filled with love. "This is where you learned to walk, Douglas. Where you built science projects on the dining table. Where we celebrated every birthday, every achievement." Douglas shifted uncomfortably, but his expression remained resolute. "That was a long time ago, Mom. Life moves on. Amanda and I have our future to consider." "And what about my future?" I asked, my voice breaking slightly. "The senior community we found has activities, dining options, medical care on site," Amanda interjected briskly. "Much more appropriate for someone in your situation." My situation, as if aging were a disease, something to be hidden away. "I'm not moving," I stated firmly, looking directly at my son. "And there's something you should know. When I transferred the house to your name, there was a clause protecting my right to live here for my lifetime. I also retain the right to sell the property myself if necessary. Douglas's expression changed from surprise to anger. Let me see that paperwork, he demanded. I retrieved the documents pointing to the relevant section. Douglas read it, his face darkening. This can't be right, he muttered. I don't remember agreeing to this. You signed the acceptance papers, I reminded him gently. It was all legally executed. Amanda snatched the document, scanning it with narrowed eyes. There must be a way around this, she said, not bothering to hide her frustration. It's ridiculous that she still has control. She. Not you, not Mom, not even Beulah. She as if I weren't sitting right there. Douglas stood abruptly. We need to talk to a lawyer about this. These old documents may not even be valid anymore. They're perfectly valid, I assured him, remaining seated. Martha confirmed it. At the mention of Martha, who had been like an aunt to Douglas growing up, his expression hardened further. You've been discussing our private business with outsiders. I needed advice, I said simply. You surprised me with your demand. It wasn't a demand, it was a family discussion, he insisted, though we both knew that wasn't true. A family discusses things together before decisions are made, I pointed out. You and Amanda had already decided what should happen to my home before you ever called me. Amanda stood now too, pulling Douglas toward the door. This is getting us nowhere. We'll have our lawyer review the situation. I rose slowly, feeling every one of my 68 years. Douglas, please. Can't we talk about this calmly, what's happened to us? For a moment I thought I saw a flicker of my son in his eyes, a hesitation. But then Amanda tugged his arm again and his expression closed off. We'll be in touch, he said coldly, and they walked out. I stood in my doorway, watching them drive away, wondering how the child I had raised with such love could become so distant, so callous. The house felt suddenly large and empty around me, despite the legal protection I had discovered. I had won this skirmish, but at what cost to the relationship with my only child? A week passed with no word from Douglas. I tried to resume my normal routines, gardening, volunteering at the hospital, meeting friends for coffee. But a heaviness had settled over me, a sadness that colored everything. The house that had always been my sanctuary now felt precarious despite the legal protection I had. Then came a text message from Douglas. Amanda and I are coming over Saturday at 2. We need to resolve this house situation once and for all. No pleasantries. No, how are you, Mom? Just a demand for my time as if I were an appointment to be scheduled. I typed and deleted several responses before simply replying, I'll be here. That Saturday, I prepared myself emotionally determined to stay calm no matter what. Perhaps with time to reflect, Douglas had reconsidered his position. Perhaps we could find a compromise that respected both his needs and mine. They arrived precisely at 2, Amanda dressed as if for a business meeting in a tailored suit, Douglas looking uncomfortable in similar formal attire. I invited them in, offering tea, which they both declined. We sat in my living room, the tension palpable. Douglas spoke first, his tone clipped and rehearsed. Mom, we've consulted with our attorney about the house situation, he began. While the reversionary clause does complicate things, there are other approaches we can take. I waited, my hands folded in my lap, wondering what approaches they had devised. The simplest solution would be for you to voluntarily relinquish your rights to the property, he continued. In exchange, we would provide a stipend to help with your living expenses elsewhere. A stipend, I repeated slowly. You want to buy me out of my own home? Amanda leaned forward. It's a generous offer, Beulah. The housing market for seniors is very affordable right now. I looked at her, then back at my son. Douglas. This house has been my home for most of my life. Your father and I bought it when we were newlyweds. Every room holds memories of our family. Memories don't appreciate in value, Mom, Douglas said dismissively, echoing Amanda's earlier sentiment. We're talking about financial realities here, and I'm talking about human realities, I countered, about respect and consideration for your mother. Douglas's expression hardened. Respect. What about respecting our needs? Amanda and I are trying to build our future. This house is legally mine, and you're being selfish by clinging to it. Selfish. The word hung in the air between us. I, who had worked double shifts to provide for him, who had sacrificed my own dreams to ensure he could pursue his, was being called selfish by my own son. "I'm not being selfish by wanting to remain in my home," I said quietly. "And if you truly needed financial help, I would gladly give you whatever I could. But this isn't about need, is it? It's about want." Amanda made a sound of disgust. "This is pointless," she said to Douglas. "She's not going to be reasonable." "Reasonable?" I felt my composure slipping. "Is it reasonable to expect your elderly mother to move out of her home of 40 years so you can buy a vacation property?" "Don't be dramatic, Mom," Douglas snapped. "And don't play the elderly card. You're perfectly capable of living somewhere else." "Of course I'm capable," I agreed. "But that doesn't mean I should have to leave my home because my son and his wife want more money." Douglas stood abruptly. "This isn't just about money. It's about Amanda and me taking control of our assets and building the life we deserve." "The life you deserve," I repeated softly. "And what do I deserve, Douglas? After raising you alone, after all the sacrifices I made." His face contorted with a rage I had never seen before. "Sacrifices! You never let me forget your precious sacrifices. Poor Beulah, the martyr, single mom, working so hard for her ungrateful son." I gasped, shocked by his outburst. "That's not true. I never saw you as a burden, never." "Save it," he spat. "I'm tired of the guilt trips. This house is mine now, and I have every right to decide what happens to it. Not according to the legal agreement," I reminded him, struggling to keep my voice steady. And that's when it happened. Douglas stepped toward me, his face red with anger. "You think some old paper protects you? You think you can stand in our way?" Before I could respond, his hand flashed out, striking me across the face with stunning force. The slap echoed through the room, my cheek burning from the impact. I staggered backward, too shocked to speak. Instead of horror at what he'd done, Douglas's eyes blazed brighter. "That felt good," he said, his voice eerily calm now. "Maybe now you'll listen." He slapped me again, harder this time, and again. I raised my hands to protect myself, but he grabbed my wrists, pushing me down onto the couch. "Douglas, stop!" I cried out, unable to believe this was happening, that my son, my baby, was physically attacking me. Amanda stood watching, making no move to intervene. In fact, as Douglas continued his assault, slapping me repeatedly across both cheeks, I saw her smile, a cold, satisfied smile that chilled me more than Douglas's blows. "You're a burden," Douglas hissed between slaps. "A manipulative, controlling burden." Slap. "I've carried your guilt my entire life." Slap. "You never let me be my own person." Slap. "Always the sacrificing mother, making sure I knew how much you gave up for me." Each accusation was punctuated by another blow until my face was numb with pain. I stopped counting after the 20th slap, tears streaming down my burning cheeks, my mind unable to process the horror of what was happening. Amanda laughed softly. "I think she's getting the message, honey," she said, as if watching an amusing performance. Douglas finally stepped back, breathing heavily. I curled into myself on the couch, trembling, my face throbbing. 30 times. He had slapped me 30 times. I would count the bruises later in the mirror, unable to believe the evidence of my own reflection. "The house will be on the market next month," Douglas stated coldly, straightening his shirt. "You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live." Amanda approached, leaning down to whisper in my ear. "Don't bother fighting it, old woman. You're too weak to do anything about this." They walked out, leaving me alone with my pain and humiliation. I heard their car start, heard them drive away as I sat frozen on my couch, unable to comprehend how my beloved son could have transformed into this monster. Eventually, I managed to stand, making my way shakily to the bathroom. The face that greeted me in the mirror was almost unrecognizable, red welts forming on both cheeks, my eyes swollen from crying. But beyond the physical marks, it was the expression in those eyes that frightened me. The devastated realization that the son I had raised, loved, sacrificed for was gone. I sank to the bathroom floor, sobs racking my body. For hours I remained there, grief and shock overwhelming me. As night fell, a numbness began to replace the sharp pain, a strange clarity emerging through the fog of betrayal. Douglas had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The son I loved had died in that moment of violence, replaced by someone I did not know, did not want to know. And in that realization came the first spark of something new: determination. A cold, clear resolve that would change all our lives forever. Morning light streamed through my bedroom window, waking me from a fitful sleep. My face still ached from yesterday's assault, the memory so painful I momentarily wondered if it had been a nightmare. The tender bruises confirmed its reality, bringing fresh tears to my eyes. I made my way slowly to the kitchen, each movement deliberate as I prepared a cup of tea. Sitting at my familiar table, I tried to organize my thoughts to understand how my life had shattered so completely. The house around me, once filled with love and security, now felt violated. I couldn't stay here, not after what had happened, regardless of my legal right to do so. But where would I go? What would I do? At 68, starting over seemed impossible. I had modest savings, my nurse's pension, but nothing that would sustain me indefinitely, especially if Douglas followed through on his threat to sell the house out from under me. The house. My mind returned to the documents I had shown Douglas yesterday, the ones that had triggered his violent outburst. I rose and retrieved them from the desk drawer where I'd replaced them, reading through the legal language more carefully this time. There it was, the clause my financial advisor had insisted upon 15 years ago. The transferor, Beulah Anderson, retains the right to sell or otherwise dispose of the property if circumstances necessitate, with proceeds of any such sale belonging to the transferor. I had the right to sell the house myself. The proceeds would be mine, not Douglas's. The realization dawned slowly, bringing with it a plan that both terrified and energized me. My hands trembling slightly, I called Martha. "Can you come over?" I asked, my voice hoarse from yesterday's crying. "I need your help with something important." Martha arrived within the hour, gasping when she saw my bruised face. "Beulah, what happened?" she demanded. I told her everything, the words spilling out in a rush. Douglas's violence, Amanda's encouragement, their ultimatum about the house. Martha listened, her expression changing from shock to outrage to grim determination. "You need to file a police report," she said firmly. I shook my head. "I can't do that to him even now." "Beulah, he assaulted you 30 times. That's a serious crime." "I know," I acknowledged, "but I have another way to handle this. I want to sell the house myself." Martha's eyes widened as she understood. "Using the reversionary clause, are you sure?" "Yes," I said, feeling more certain with each passing moment. "I want to sell it quickly before they can try anything else, but I need your help to make sure everything is done legally." Martha nodded thoughtfully. "I have a friend in real estate, Sarah Patterson. She specializes in quick sales, has a network of investors who buy with cash. I can call her if you're certain." "I am," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "But there's more to my plan." I outlined what I wanted to do, the timing, the details. Martha listened, occasionally raising an eyebrow, but not interrupting. When I finished, she let out a long breath. "That's comprehensive," she said finally. "Are you absolutely sure this will burn bridges permanently?" I touched my bruised cheek gently. The bridges were burned yesterday when my son decided I was worth nothing more than an asset to be liquidated. I'm just acknowledging the reality. Martha nodded, her expression somber. "All right then, let me make some calls." For the next 2 hours, we worked through the logistics. Martha contacted Sarah, who agreed to come by that afternoon to assess the house. I began taking inventory of my possessions, deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to discard. Sarah arrived promptly at 2, a brisk, efficient woman in her 50s with a portfolio of comparable sales in the neighborhood. She tactfully avoided commenting on my bruised face, focusing instead on the business at hand. "The market is strong right now," she informed us after walking through the house. "Your location is excellent and the house has good bones despite needing some updates. I have an investor who's been looking for exactly this type of property. He could close in as little as 7 days, all cash." "That's perfect," I said. "How much?" She named a figure that made my eyebrows raise. "That's more than I expected." Sarah smiled. "Like I said, great location. The investor plans to renovate and flip, so he's factoring in the potential value after improvements." We spent the next hour completing paperwork, setting things in motion. Sarah promised to have the investor visit the next day, and assuming he approved, we could sign final papers by the end of the week. After she left, Martha and I continued planning the next phases. I would need somewhere to live, storage for belongings I couldn't take immediately, and help with the physical process of moving. You can stay with me for as long as you need, Martha offered. I have plenty of room since Richard passed. Thank you, I said gratefully, but I don't want to impose long term. I'm thinking of looking for a small condo near the beach. I've always dreamed of living near the ocean. Martha smiled. With the proceeds from this sale, you could buy something lovely outright, no mortgage. Financial security for your future. Financial security that Douglas and Amanda had tried to steal from me. The thought brought a fresh wave of pain, but I pushed it aside. I needed to focus on practicalities now. Let's talk about timing, I said. I want to be precise about this. Douglas worked predictable hours, usually leaving his office around 6:30. Amanda, from what I gathered from Douglas's occasional mentions, worked slightly shorter days at her marketing firm, typically arriving home by 6. The house was a 30-minute drive from their offices in normal traffic. I want everything removed from the house before they would normally arrive home, I explained to Martha. They need to find it completely empty. Martha nodded, making notes. So we need movers scheduled for that day, probably starting early morning to be sure everything is out by, say, 5:30 at the latest. Exactly, I confirmed. And I need to be completely moved out and settled at your place before then, too. Over the next few days, the plan came together with surprising efficiency. The investor visited, approved the house, and agreed to Sarah's asking price. We signed the final papers on Friday with closing scheduled for the following Wednesday, a mere 5 days away. I hired a moving company. Martha recommended scheduling them for Wednesday morning. I began packing my personal belongings, sorting through decades of accumulated memories. Each object I touched, whether Douglas's childhood artwork, family photographs, the quilt Thomas's mother had made for our wedding, carried emotional weight I hadn't anticipated. Some items were easy to designate: clothes, personal care items, books, and heirlooms would come with me. Furniture, kitchen items, and general household goods would be donated to a women's shelter Martha worked with. But Douglas's things, the remnants of his childhood and youth I had preserved, presented a dilemma. After much consideration, I packed a small box with select items, his baby book graduation photos, a few special awards, and mementos. These I would have delivered to his office, a final gesture, acknowledging our shared past. The rest I decided to donate or discard, a symbolic cutting of ties that felt both painful and necessary. By Tuesday evening, most of my packing was complete. Martha helped me move my essential items to her home, setting up the guest room that would be my temporary refuge. We reviewed the schedule for Wednesday one final time before I tried to sleep, my mind racing despite physical exhaustion. Wednesday dawned clear and bright. The movers arrived at 8, efficiently loading my labeled boxes and furniture into their truck. By noon, my personal belongings were either at Martha's or in storage. The donation team arrived at 1, removing the items I had designated for the women's shelter. By 3 o'clock, the house stood empty, echoing with footsteps as I walked through each room one last time. Memories flooded me in every space, Thomas and I bringing newborn Douglas home to the nursery we had painted sunshine yellow, Douglas taking his first steps across the living room floor, family dinners at the now absent kitchen table, birthday celebrations, Christmas mornings, ordinary days that had built a life. Sarah arrived at 4 with the final closing documents and a cashier's check for the proceeds. We sat at the kitchen counter, the last surface remaining in the house, and completed the transaction that ended my ownership of the home I had loved for over 40 years. The new owner will take possession immediately, Sarah confirmed, handing me the keys. He's already scheduled contractors to begin renovations tomorrow. I nodded, suddenly unable to speak past the lump in my throat. This was it. The final severance, not just from the house, but from the life I had built with Thomas, the life where Douglas was my beloved son, rather than a stranger who had raised his hand against me. At 4:30, I walked out the front door for the last time, not looking back as I joined Martha in her waiting car. We drove to her home in silence, the magnitude of the day's events too overwhelming for casual conversation. By 5 o'clock, I was settled in Martha's guest room, a cup of tea growing cold beside me as I stared out the window at the unfamiliar view. The movers had delivered the small box of Douglas's mementos to his office building, timed to arrive after he had left for the day. Everything had gone according to plan. Now came the hardest part, waiting. Waiting for Douglas and Amanda to arrive at an empty house. waiting for the inevitable explosion of rage when they discovered what I had done, waiting to find out if the son I had raised still existed somewhere inside the man who had struck me. At 6:45, my phone rang. Douglas's name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. "What have you done?" He shouted, his voice so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Where is everything? Where are you?" "I sold the house," I replied, my voice calm despite my racing heart, as was my legal right. There was a moment of stunned silence then. "You what?" "I sold the house," I repeated. "The new owner has already taken possession. He'll be renovating starting tomorrow." "You can't do that," Douglas yelled. "That house is mine." "No, it wasn't," I corrected gently. "As I tried to explain to you before you decided that slapping your mother 30 times was an appropriate response. The reversionary clause gave me the right to sell the property with all proceeds belonging to me." "This is insane," he sputtered. "I'm calling a lawyer right now. This is theft." "It's not theft, Douglas. I've already consulted with several attorneys who confirmed my rights under the original transfer agreement. The sale is legal binding and complete." I heard Amanda in the background, her voice shrill with panic. "What about our things? Where is everything?" "What things, Amanda?" I asked, genuine confusion in my voice. "The house contained my possessions accumulated over 40 years of living there. I've either taken them with me, placed them in storage, or donated them to charity." "But Douglas's childhood things?" she protested. "His awards, his memorabilia?" I was surprised by her concern for these items given her usual disdain for anything related to Douglas's past. "I had a small box of mementos delivered to his office," I said. "The truly important things." Douglas came back on the line. "Where are you?" he demanded. "We're coming over right now to sort this out." "No, you're not," I said firmly. "After what happened last time we were together, I have no intention of seeing you in person." "Mom," he said, his voice suddenly changing, softening in a way that tugged at my heart. "I'm sorry about that. I lost my temper. It won't happen again." The abrupt shift to contrition, so calculating and transparent, confirmed I had made the right decision. "I'm sure it won't," I agreed, "because we won't be seeing each other again." "What do you mean?" Panic edged into his tone now. "Mom, where are you staying? You can't just disappear." "I haven't disappeared, Douglas. I've moved on. Just as you and Amanda wanted me to, though perhaps not in the way you envisioned. But the money from the house," he pressed, "that should be mine. At least part of it. I'm your son, your heir." The naked greed in his voice extinguished the last flicker of hope I had harbored that somewhere beneath the influence of Amanda and his own materialism, my real son still existed. "The money is mine legally and morally," I stated clearly. "I've secured my future, which you were so concerned about when suggesting senior living communities. This isn't over," he threatened. "Amanda and I will fight this." "There's nothing to fight," I said wearily. "It's done. The house is sold, the money is secured, and I've moved on with my life." "You're making a terrible mistake," he warned. "Cutting me off like this. You'll regret it when you're old and alone." The irony of his statement almost made me laugh. "I'm already old, Douglas, but I'm not alone. I have friends who respect me who don't see me as an inconvenient obstacle to their material ambitions." I heard Amanda say something in the background, her tone urgent. Douglas covered the phone briefly, then returned. "We're coming to find you," he said. "Martha's place, that's where you'd go." A chill ran through me. "Douglas, do not come here. Martha is prepared to call the police if you appear on her property. She has photographs of what you did to my face. Do you really want to explain 30 slaps to a police officer?" Silence. Then, "You wouldn't press charges against your own son." "The Douglas I raised the son I loved would never have struck his mother," I replied, my voice breaking slightly. "I don't know who you are anymore." More silence, then a click as he ended the call. I sat, holding the phone, tears streaming down my face. Martha appeared in the doorway, her expression concerned. "Are you all right?" she asked gently. I nodded, wiping my eyes. "It's done," I whispered. "It's really over." She came to sit beside me, taking my hand in hers. "No, Beulah. It's not over. It's just beginning. Your new life on your terms." I leaned against my friend's shoulder, exhausted, yet somehow lighter than I had felt in years. The pain of losing Douglas, the son I had known and loved, would never completely heal. But I had found my strength, my voice, my boundaries, and that was a beginning worth embracing. 6 months after selling my house, I moved into a small but beautiful condominium overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The sound of waves breaking against the shore greeted me each morning, a soothing rhythm that helped heal the wounds of betrayal. At 69, I had begun a new chapter I never could have imagined. The proceeds from the house sale had been substantial enough to purchase my condo outright, with money remaining for investment. Martha had introduced me to her financial advisor, who helped create a secure plan for my retirement years. For the first time in my adult life, I had true financial independence and security. Douglas had made several attempts to contact me in the weeks following our final phone conversation. Emails, text messages, even letters delivered to Martha's home, alternating between threats of legal action and pleas for reconciliation. I read them all, but responded to none. The legal threats were empty, as multiple attorneys confirmed, and the apologies rang hollow, always circling back to requests for money. Eventually, a different type of letter arrived. Thin, official-looking with a law firm's letterhead. Divorce papers, I learned later. Amanda had left Douglas just 3 months after our confrontation, taking a significant portion of their joint assets in the settlement. Without the windfall they had expected from my house, their financial situation had apparently deteriorated rapidly. I felt a complex mix of emotions at this new sadness for the pain Douglas must be experiencing, but also a grim acknowledgement that actions have consequences. Amanda had shown her true nature, just as Douglas had shown his. Neither revelation surprised me. My new home became a haven of peace and self-discovery. I decorated it simply but elegantly, choosing only items that brought me joy. A small balcony became my garden space, pots of herbs and flowers thriving in the coastal climate. I often sat there in the evenings watching the sun set over the water, grateful for this unexpected gift of a fresh start. I volunteered at the local hospital 2 days a week, using my nursing skills to comfort patients and mentor younger staff. The work connected me to my community and gave structure to my days. I joined a book club, took watercolor classes at the senior center, adopted a small dog from the shelter, a terrier mix named Jasper, who became my loyal companion. New friendships blossomed. Martha visited often, staying for long weekends of beach walks and conversations. I met my neighbors, mostly retirees like myself, and found a circle of women who gathered weekly for coffee and conversation. After decades of putting others first, I was learning the joy of nurturing my own interests and relationships. 8 months after moving to the coast, I received a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. "Mom, it's me," Douglas's voice subdued and hesitant. "I'd like to talk. No demands, no accusations, just talk. I'm in therapy now. I understand if you don't want to hear from me, but I'd appreciate a chance to apologize properly." He left his number and ended the call. I listened to the message several times, emotions washing over me in waves. The hurt was still there, the memory of his hand striking my face still vivid. But there was something in his voice, a humility I hadn't heard in years, that gave me pause. For 2 weeks I carried the message with me, not yet ready to respond, but not willing to delete it either. I discussed it with Martha, with my new friends, even with my therapist, whom I had been seeing monthly to process the trauma of Douglas's assault and the end of our relationship. "You don't owe him a response," my therapist reminded me. "Your healing doesn't require his participation." "I know," I agreed, "but I keep thinking about forgiveness, not for his sake, but for mine." "Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation," she pointed out. "You can forgive him without allowing him back into your life." I nodded, understanding the distinction, but still uncertain about what I truly wanted. Did some part of me still hope to reconnect with my son? Or was that chapter truly closed? After much reflection, I decided to respond with a short text message. "I received your voicemail. I'm not ready for a conversation yet, but I appreciate your apology." His reply came almost immediately. "Thank you for responding, Mom. I understand. Whenever or if ever you're ready, I'm here. No pressure, no expectations." This exchange opened a tentative line of communication. Over the next several months, we exchanged occasional text messages, brief and carefully neutral. I learned that he had moved to a smaller apartment after the divorce had begun. Therapy to address anger issues stemming from childhood insecurities had reconnected with old friends Amanda had discouraged him from seeing. Slowly, Very slowly, I began to see glimpses of the son I had raised. Not enough to trust him again. Not yet, perhaps not ever completely, but enough to consider the possibility of a carefully bounded relationship in the future. A year after selling the house, I agreed to meet Douglas for lunch at a restaurant halfway between our homes. I chose a public place intentionally with Martha aware of the meeting and prepared to join us if I felt uncomfortable. I arrived early, selecting a table with a clear path to the exit, my heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. When Douglas walked in, I barely recognized him. He had lost weight, his designer clothes replaced by simple jeans and a button-down shirt. The arrogance in his posture was gone, replaced by a hesitancy that reminded me of the shy boy he had once been. He spotted me and approached slowly, stopping a respectful distance from the table. "Mom," he said softly, "thank you for meeting me." I gestured to the chair across from me. "You can sit down, Douglas." He did his hands, fidgeting nervously with his napkin. Up close, I could see new lines around his eyes, a weariness that hadn't been there before. "You look well," he offered. "The ocean air agrees with you." "Yes," I replied. "My new home has been good for me." An awkward silence stretched between us. Finally, Douglas took a deep breath. "Mom, I know a simple apology can't undo what I did. I was cruel, selfish, and violent. There's no excuse for any of it, and I don't expect forgiveness. But I want you to know that I understand now how wrong I was, and I'm truly deeply sorry." I studied his face, looking for signs of the manipulation I had grown accustomed to in recent years. Instead, I saw genuine remorse tears gathering in eyes so like his father's. "What happened, Douglas?" I asked quietly. "When did money become more important than family? When did I become an obstacle rather than your mother?" He wiped his eyes, not meeting my gaze. "It happened gradually. Amanda had certain expectations about lifestyle status. I wanted to impress her to be the successful man she wanted. Then it became about keeping up appearances, maintaining the image we'd created." "And slapping me," I pressed, needing to hear him acknowledge the worst of his actions. He flinched, visibly. "I've spent months in therapy trying to understand how I could have done that. The only explanation, not excuse, is that I was spiraling out of control, filled with rage that had nothing to do with you and everything to do with my own failures and insecurities." I nodded, not offering absolution but acknowledging his response. "And now, what do you want from me now, Douglas?" He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "Nothing, Mom. I don't want or expect anything from you. I just want you to know that I recognize what I lost, what I threw away. My mother, my moral compass, the foundation of everything good in my life." Tears pricked my eyes at his words, but I blinked them away. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again," I said honestly. "What you did wasn't just a momentary lapse. It was a culmination of years of changing values, of putting material things above human connection." "I know," he acknowledged, "and I wouldn't trust me either. All I can say is that I'm trying to find my way back to the person you raised me to be." We talked for nearly 2 hours, carefully navigating the painful terrain of our shared past and separate presents. I told him about my volunteer work, my new friend's Jasper. He shared his struggles to rebuild his career after the financial setbacks of the divorce, his weekly therapy sessions, his reconnection with childhood friends. As we prepared to leave, Douglas hesitated. "Would it be all right if I called you sometimes, just to check in?" I considered his request. "You can text," I offered. "Let's continue taking small steps." Relief washed over his face. "Thank you," he said simply. We parted without touching, both of us, aware that physical contact was a bridge too far at this point. I watched him walk to his car, a man humbled by his own mistakes, trying to find redemption. Whether he would succeed, whether we would ever rebuild even a fraction of our former relationship, remained to be seen. As I drove back to my coastal home, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The pain of betrayal, the shock of violence, the courage to start over, the tentative steps toward a new understanding of forgiveness. At nearly 70, I had learned that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to demand respect, to rebuild a life on your own terms. The house I had loved was gone, but the home I had created for myself was stronger, healthier, more authentically mine than any physical structure could ever be. I had discovered a resilience I never knew. I possessed a capacity for joy independent of others' approval or presence. Douglas would need to find his own path forward, as would I. Perhaps those paths would intersect meaningfully again someday. Perhaps not. Either way, I had found my peace, my voice, my power, and that was the most valuable property of all. If my story resonates with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect your dignity and well-being? How did you find the strength to start over? Remember to like this video and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and self-discovery. Life may bring unexpected challenges, but as I learned at 72, it's never too late to write a new chapter. Thank you for listening, and may you always find the courage to stand in your own power.